Black CEO publicly denied service. Minutes later, the manager's career disappeared. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The showroom was immaculate glass walls, polished floors, and a silence that smelled like money. Centered beneath white lights sat a red luxury sedan, flawless, waiting to be claimed. People moved carefully here. Voices stayed low. Shoes whispered. Respect was assumed. Until it wasn't. Security. Remove her immediately. The command cut through the room like a snapped wire. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. A sales manager in a tailored navy suit stood rigid, arm extended, finger pointed inches from a woman's chest. His jaw was tight, eyes blazing with the confidence of someone who believed the room belonged to him. She didn't flinch. The woman, black, composed, elegantly understated, stood with her hands relaxed at her sides. No designer logos, no entourage. Just a fitted cream dress, quiet posture, and an expression that didn't ask permission to exist. She looked past the pointed finger, past the manager's anger, and took in the showroom as if she were measuring it. Behind her, a line of sales associates froze. A few customers lingered near the glass, pretending not to stare while staring anyway. The red car gleamed between them like a trophy no one was allowed to touch. I asked a simple question, the manager snapped, louder now, feeding off the audience. Who authorized you to be here? She met his eyes at last. Calm, level, unbothered. I'm here to speak with someone about a purchase, she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. A scoff rippled from the manager's throat. This isn't a browsing floor. This is a premium showroom. If you're not prepared to do serious business, you're wasting everyone's time. A junior associate shifted his weight behind the desk, uncomfortable. Another glanced at the tablet in his hands, then quickly away. No one spoke. The manager took a step closer, invading her space, lowering his voice just enough to sound reasonable while being anything but. We get people like this every week, he said, not looking at her anymore, but at the room. They come in, take photos, touch vehicles they can't afford, and cause scenes. She didn't react. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. That silence irritated him more than anger ever could. I said remove her, he barked again, this time toward the entrance. Two security guards began to move. A customer near the back frowned. Another crossed his arms. Someone muttered, "That's unnecessary." Still, the room stayed obediently quiet. This place trained people well. The woman finally spoke, not to the manager, but to the guards approaching. "I'll wait," she said. "There's no rush." The words landed strangely, like a statement made by someone who knew how time really worked. The manager laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You'll wait outside." All riveted. She turned her head slightly, studying the red car once more. The reflection in its hood caught her face steady, unreadable. For a brief moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, recognition. This wasn't new. She had stood in rooms like this before, years ago. Different cities, same assumptions, same looks, same quiet calculation by people who thought power announced itself loudly. The guards slowed, unsure now. The junior associate swallowed and glanced at the manager. "Sir, should we verify?" "Do your job," the manager snapped, cutting him off without looking. The woman reached into her bag, not hurried, not dramatic. Phones lifted subtly around the room. Attention settled thick, expectant, like the breath held before a storm. And somewhere beneath the polished lights and practiced smiles, the balance of the room began to shift. The room expected her to protest. That was the pattern they were used, to raised voices, shaky explanations, nervous laughter meant to soften suspicion. But she did none of it. She stood there as if the command to remove her hadn't been spoken at all, as if the showroom still belonged to silence and not humiliation. One of the guards slowed his pace. The other adjusted his grip on the radio at his shoulder, eyes darting briefly toward the manager, then back to her. Neither touched her. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, not to film, not to threaten, just enough movement to remind everyone she was in control of her own body. Her thumb hovered over the screen, then stopped. She didn't make the call yet. Not yet. The manager mistook her stillness for defeat. "You see?" he said to the room, spreading his hands like a host reclaiming order. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. People think if they stand quietly long enough, we'll bend the rules." Mike on it, he leaned against the desk, confidence returning, voice smoother now. "Maham, this dealership caters to a very specific clientele, high-level buyers, executives, people who don't need explanations." Her gaze lifted slowly. When their eyes met, something subtle changed. Not the volume in the room, but the temperature. "I didn't ask for an explanation," she said. "I asked for service." The words were simple, clean, no edge to hide behind. A sales associate near the red car shifted uncomfortably. He had been with the company for less than a year, still new enough to believe the training slides about inclusion and professionalism. He looked from her to the manager, then down at the tablet in his hands. The screen glowed softly, waiting. The manager scoffed. "Service is earned here." She tilted her head slightly, considering him. "Is it?" Behind the glass wall, two customers pretended to examine brochures. One of them, a middle-aged woman in heels too sharp for standing, watched the exchange through the reflection of the car's hood. She frowned, not quite sure why. The manager straightened his jacket. "We've already wasted enough time. Escort her out." The guard stepped closer again, but slower this time. One of them cleared his throat. "Mom, if you'll just—" "I'm fine where I am," she replied gently. The calm in her voice was disarming. It wasn't compliance. It wasn't resistance. It was certainty. She glanced around the showroom, not searching for allies, not begging for witnesses, but observing. The layout, the exits, the people. She noticed the junior associate's clenched jaw, the way one salesperson avoided eye contact entirely, the way another watched her with something close to curiosity. They were all trying to place her. And they couldn't. The manager sensed it. The uncertainty irritated him. He stepped forward again, lowering his voice. "Let me be very clear," he said. "You don't look like someone who belongs in this room." There it was, finally spoken aloud. A ripple moved through the onlookers, not shock, but recognition. They'd heard versions of that sentence before, maybe not directed at them, maybe not today, but enough to know exactly what it meant. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled. Not to steady herself, she was already steady, but as if giving the room time to catch up. "Interesting," she said, "because I was thinking the same thing about you." The junior associate's eyes widened. He looked up from his tablet, startled by the shift. The manager laughed sharply. "Excuse me? You're loud," she continued, her tone even. "But you're not confident. Confident people don't need an audience." The room went still. The guard stopped completely now. The manager's smile faltered, just for a second. "I don't have to stand here and be insulted." "No," she replied. "You don't. But you chose to." She glanced at her phone again. This time, she tapped the screen once. A single action, no theatrics. Somewhere beyond the glass walls, beyond the assumptions and polished floors, something had just been set in motion. The manager's patience snapped not loudly, but sharply, like glass cracking under pressure. "Enough," he said, raising a hand as if ending a meeting. "This conversation is over." He turned toward the front desk, already rewriting the scene in his favor. "Make a note," he told the nearest associate. "Potential disruption. Refuse to comply. No verified intent to purchase." The associate hesitated, fingers hovering over the tablet. "Sir, she hasn't." "I said make the note," the manager repeated. Slower now, colder. Authority sharpened every syllable. The woman watched him with a steady gaze, absorbing the dismissal not as an insult, but as data. Every word he chose revealed more than he realized. She had seen this tactic before: label first, justify later. Once the story was written, the truth wouldn't matter. "So this is how you do it," she said quietly. He glanced back, irritated. "Do what?" "Decide who's worth your time before they speak." A faint smirk tugged at his mouth. "It's called experience." "No," she corrected. "It's called assumption. A customer near the glass shifted, uncomfortable. Another cleared his throat. The junior associate swallowed hard and finally looked down at the tablet again. The name field was still blank. The system waited. The manager gestured toward the red car behind her. "You think that vehicle is just sitting here for anyone who walks in?" he said. "That car costs more than most people make in a year." She turned slowly, eyes tracing the car's sleek lines, the emblem on its hood. "I know exactly what it costs." He laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he believed laughter would put her back in her place. "Then you also know you can't afford it." The words landed heavy. Not shouted, not whispered, delivered with the confidence of a verdict. A sales associate near the service desk stiffened. Someone behind the woman muttered, "Damn." Another shook his head slightly, as if hoping this would end before it got worse. It didn't. "I'm going to ask you one last time," the manager said, stepping closer, voice firm and practiced. "Do you have an appointment? A financial pre-approval? Anything that proves you belong here?" She faced him fully now. "I don't need to prove my right to stand in a public showroom. There are been market." "This isn't public," he snapped. "This is a private business." Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Then you should be very careful how you run it." The manager exhaled through his nose, annoyed. "You're refusing to answer basic questions." "I'm refusing to be interrogated," she replied. The distinction seemed to irritate him even more. "Security," he said again, louder this time, as if volume could restore his authority. "If she doesn't leave immediately, escort her out." And where plighted friend. The guards exchanged a glance. One of them hesitated. "Sir, she hasn't caused." "I don't pay you to think," the manager cut in. "I pay you to act." The woman took a small step back, not away from them, but to give them space. The gesture was subtle, respectful. It wasn't the movement of someone being chased out. It was the movement of someone choosing where to stand. "You're making this a spectacle," the manager added, lowering his voice as if that made it kinder. "People are watching. And this video," she have dispressed added. She looked around the room again. Phones were no longer subtle. Eyes were fixed. Whatever story he thought he was controlling was already slipping. "Good," she said. "They should see this." His jaw tightened. "See what? A woman who won't take a hint?" "No," she replied. "A manager who confuses power with permission." The junior associate finally spoke, voice unsteady but clear. "Sir, her name isn't in the system because we haven't asked for it." The room froze. The manager turned slowly. "What did you say?" The associate swallowed. "I mean, we never ran her name." Silence stretched thin. The manager's eyes flicked back to the woman, then to the tablet, then to the people watching. For the first time, doubt crept in. Not enough to stop him, but enough to anger him. "That's irrelevant," he snapped. "She's already refused to cooperate." The woman met the associate's eyes briefly, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then she reached into her bag again and withdrew a sleek card, placing it gently on the desk between them. "Run it," she said. The associate hesitated, then reached for the card. The manager slammed his hand down. "Don't." The sound echoed through the showroom. Every head turned. The woman didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "That's your mistake." "Bottom intentioned." And as the associate's fingers hovered between obedience and curiosity, the balance of the room shifted once more, this time visibly. The card lay on the desk like a challenge. Black, minimal, unbranded. The kind of card that didn't beg to be noticed, only recognized. The junior associate stared at it, his pulse suddenly loud in his ears. He had been trained to spot counterfeit confidence, trained to follow hierarchy without hesitation, but nothing in his training explained why the manager had stopped him from running a name. "Sir," the associate said again, quieter now. "It's standard procedure." Number tapped. The manager didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on the woman, jaw clenched. "I said don't." The word "don't" hung in the air, heavy with threat. The associate felt every eye in the room shift toward him. This was the moment the kind no training manual prepared you for. Do you obey the voice that signs your paycheck, or the rules that are supposed to protect everyone? He swallowed and glanced down at the tablet in his hands. The screen glowed softly, patient, waiting. The woman didn't rush him. She didn't pressure him. She didn't even look at him. That was what tipped something inside his chest. She trusted the process more than the people abusing it. "I just need a name," the associate said, his voice steadier than he felt. The manager snapped his head around. "You're not paid to argue with me. I'm paid to follow protocol," the associate replied. The words surprised even him. A murmur rippled through the showroom. Small, uncertain, but real. The manager took a step forward, lowering his voice. "Do you want to keep this job?" The associate hesitated. For a split second, fear flared rent, bills, the months it took to land this position. Then he thought of every customer he'd watched get waved through without question. Every shortcut taken because someone looked like money. He picked up the card. The sound was barely audible, but it landed like thunder. The manager's face flushed. "Put that down." And Ivor, the velvet. The associate's fingers moved across the tablet. "Ma'am," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "Your name?" She answered calmly. No hesitation, no flourish. He typed. The system paused. For one long, terrible second, nothing happened. The manager exhaled sharply, a smile tugging at his mouth. "See? Waste of—" The screen refreshed. The associate's breath caught. His eyes widened. He leaned closer, then sat back, stunned. He checked the spelling, ran it again, same result. Behind him, another salesperson noticed his expression and stepped closer. "What is it?" she whispered. The associate didn't answer right away. He looked up at the woman, really looked at her this time, at the way she stood, unshaken, at the way the room seemed to bend subtly around her presence. Then he spoke. She's in the system." The showroom went silent. The manager laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Everyone's in some system. That doesn't mean anything. Way is never due." The associate shook his head slowly. "No, I mean, she's flagged." "Flagged how?" the salesperson asked. The associate swallowed. "Executive level." A beat, then another. The manager's smile faltered. "That's impossible." The associate turned the tablet slightly, just enough for the salesperson to see. Her hand flew to her mouth. A customer near the glass leaned forward. "What's going on?" someone whispered. The woman finally spoke again, her voice steady, precise. "You didn't want to run my name because you were afraid of what you'd find." The manager stepped closer to the desk, anger rising fast now, panic close behind it. "This is a mistake," he snapped. "Systems glitch all the time." The associate shook his head. "It's not a glitch. There's a note here." "What note?" the manager demanded. The associate hesitated, then read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "Authorized. Immediate access. Do not delay. While in 23 Ready Tour." The words echoed through the room like a verdict. The manager's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since she'd walked in, he looked unsure. Phones were fully raised now. No one pretended not to watch. The woman stepped forward just enough to reclaim the space he'd tried to take from her. "You asked who authorized me to be here," she said. "You should have asked who authorized you to stop me." Licklard. The associate's hands trembled slightly as he held the tablet. He realized in that moment that speaking up hadn't just changed the room, it had changed him. The witness had awakened, and the story the manager thought he controlled was no longer his to tell. The room didn't erupt. It compressed. Air tightened between bodies. Conversations didn't resume, they vanished. Even the showroom's ambient music seemed to fade, as if the building itself was listening. The manager stared at the tablet like it had betrayed him. "That note doesn't mean what you think it means," he said finally, too quickly. "Executive access can be triggered for a lot of reasons. Partnerships, vendors, temporary reviews." His voice was louder now. Defensive. Searching for ground. The associate didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was already sitting on the screen. The woman remained still, but something in her posture shifted, subtle, deliberate. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was allowing him to keep going. "You think you can just walk in here?" the manager continued, turning his frustration back on her, "and let one nervous employee undermine protocol?" She met his gaze. Protocol doesn't panic when it's questioned. Market batter. A few customers exchanged looks. Someone near the entrance shook their head openly now. The guards stood off to the side, no longer advancing. no longer sure who they were supposed to protect. The manager noticed. That was when he crossed the line. He reached out, not violently, not dramatically, but enough. His hand brushed her forearm as he stepped closer, asserting space that was no longer his to take. "Don't test me," he said under his breath. The contact was brief, barely visible, but it changed everything. The associate stiffened. "Sir, don't touch her." The woman looked down at the spot on her arm where his hand had been, then back up at his face. Her expression didn't harden, it sharpened. "You should step back," she said calmly. He didn't. Instead, he scoffed. "Now, you're playing victim?" The word echoed. A murmur rose, no longer contained. A woman near the glass spoke aloud. That was unnecessary. A man crossed his arms and said, "She hasn't done anything wrong." The manager's control slipped further. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he snapped at the room. Disruption. Manipulation. People who don't know their place. The phrase landed like a slap. The woman closed her eyes for a brief moment, not in defeat, but in memory. She remembered a bank lobby, years ago, being asked to wait while others walked past her. Remembered a conference where her badge was questioned twice. Remembered the smile people wore right before they decided she didn't belong. Different rooms, same energy. She opened her eyes. "This is the part where you usually win," she said quietly. "Because people get tired. They leave. They don't want the trouble." He laughed, brittle. "Looks like that's about to happen." She took a slow step forward, reclaiming the space he'd tried to dominate. "Not today." The manager raised his voice, no longer caring who heard. "Security! Escort her out! Now!" "Ferdinand is back to like to me." The guards hesitated. One of them spoke, carefully. "Sir, we need to de-escalate." The manager spun on him. "I gave you an order, and I'm telling you," the guard replied. "Firm now, this isn't how we handle it." That was the moment. The moment the room understood something irreversible had happened. The manager looked around and realized too late that he was no longer surrounded by agreement. He was surrounded by witnesses. The woman reached into her bag again. This time, she didn't pull out a card. She pulled out her phone. Not rushed, not angry, just precise. She unlocked it and placed a single call. "Hi," she said softly when the line connected. "Yes, it's me." The manager scoffed. "Calling backup?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "No, calling accountability." The associate watched, heart pounding. The customers leaned in. The guard stood still, hands open, waiting. The woman turned slightly, her voice still calm, still controlled. "They touched me," she said into the phone, "and they refused to run my name." A pause. Then, "Yes, that one." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. The manager opened his mouth to speak, maybe to threaten, maybe to apologize, maybe to spin the story one last time. She cut him off with a single sentence. "You just turned a bad decision into a career-ending one." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was final. The manager expected shouting. He expected threats, maybe tears. He expected the kind of reaction that would let him dismiss her again, emotional, unprofessional, out of control. That was the script he knew how to manage. What he didn't expect was stillness. The woman stood exactly where she was, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady, as if the room hadn't just turned hostile. Around her, everything felt suspended guards mid-stance, associates frozen, customers holding their phones without realizing they'd stopped blinking. She didn't look at the manager first. She looked at the room, at the people watching, at the associate who had found the courage to run her name, at the guard who had refused to touch her again, at the witnesses who would remember this moment long after the red car lost its shine. Then she spoke. "Everyone here is about to learn something important," she said, voice calm, carrying without effort. "Not about me, about systems." The manager scoffed, trying to recover ground. "You think a phone call changes anything?" She turned to him slowly. "No, what it activates does." She reached into her bag once more, this time removing nothing. The call was already made, the mechanism already turning. Somewhere beyond the showroom, beyond the glass, the lights, the fragile confidence processes were waking up. Logs opening, permissions shifting, people who didn't raise their voices but decided outcomes. The associate's tablet chimed softly. He looked down instinctively. His eyes widened. "Sir," he said, then stopped, corrected himself. "Ma'am," the manager snapped. "What now?" The associate swallowed. "There's a system alert." The woman didn't look surprised. "Read it." "It's clue doubters." The associate hesitated, then did. "Temporary suspension of on-site managerial authority pending review." The words hit the floor like dropped glass. "What?" the manager barked. "That's not possible." The associate turned the tablet so others could see. The alert glowed unmistakably. Time-stamped. Authorized. The guards straightened not toward her, but subtly away from the manager. The manager laughed, high and strained. "This is a misunderstanding. I'll call regional." "With my question, Bodhi's is faced." "You can," she said. "They're already on the line." He froze. "You see," she continued, her tone almost instructional now, "real power doesn't argue in public. It documents. It timestamps. It escalates, quietly." A customer near the glass whispered, "Oh my God!" The manager took a step back. "Who do you think you are?" That was the question he should have asked at the beginning. She met his eyes, and for the first time there was no softness left to misread as restraint. "I'm someone who doesn't need to raise her voice to raise consequences." The associate's tablet chimed again. Another alert. He read silently this time, then looked up, stunned. "Access revoked," he said. "Your login just—" "Enough!" the manager shouted, reaching for the desk as if touching something solid would anchor him. "This is ridiculous. You're all overreacting." The woman took one step forward, not aggressive, not triumphant, just final. "This isn't an overreaction," she said. "It's a correction." She turned slightly, addressing the associate and the guards. "Thank you for following procedure when it mattered." The associate nodded, chest tight with something like relief. The guards shifted their stance. Professional now, neutral, no longer hers to fear. The manager looked around desperately. "You're going to let her do this? Over a misunderstanding?" She answered before anyone else could. "You publicly denied service. You made assumptions. You touched me. You overrode protocol to protect your ego." She paused. "And you did it on camera." Phones were no longer hidden. The realization hit him all at once. The room, the witnesses, the system alerts, the silence that no longer protected him. "This review won't take long," she added. "It never does." The manager's voice dropped. "You planned this." She shook her head once. "No, I plan to buy a car." She glanced at the red sedan, still untouched, still waiting. "You planned the rest?" "And renated to thous." "Let's of guide." The associate felt it then, the shift everyone talks about but rarely sees. The moment when authority evaporates and leaves only accountability behind. And in the quiet that followed, it became clear. The storm wasn't coming. It had already passed, leaving consequences in its wake. The room leaned forward without realizing it. This was the moment people would later describe as the pause, that thin stretch of time when everything stops pretending. The manager stood frozen behind the desk, his authority stripped down to posture and noise, both failing him now. The associate held the tablet like evidence. The guards no longer looked at the woman as a problem. They looked at her as a presence. She didn't rush the reveal. That was the mistake everyone else always made, thinking power had to announce itself quickly before it was questioned. She understood something different. Silence, used correctly, does the work for you. "You keep asking who I think I am," she said at last, voice low, steady, impossible to ignore. "You should have asked who you work for." The manager scoffed weakly. "I work for this dealership." She nodded once. "So do I." A few people laughed nervously, unsure how to place the sentence. The associate frowned, scrolling instinctively, his finger stopping on a line of text he hadn't noticed before. His throat went dry. "Mom," he said quietly, there's another tab. 9, so keys." She didn't look at him. "Open it." The manager's head snapped up. "You're not touching anything else." The associate hesitated, then tapped the screen. His face changed instantly. "What?" the manager demanded. The associate turned the tablet toward him, hands trembling now. "Ownership records," he said. "Regional, group level." The manager leaned in, squinting. His eyes scanned the screen once, then again, faster this time. The color drained from his face. No, he whispered. Then louder, desperate. That's not this has to be outdated. The woman stepped forward, reclaiming the space between them without effort. It's current. 2. She looked around the showroom at the employees, the customers, the guards, the phones recording every second. Then she said the sentence that would follow the manager for the rest of his career. You just ordered security on the woman who owns this dealership group. The room collapsed into silence. Not shock, not chaos. Recognition. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Oh my God." A customer near the glass muttered, "She owns it?" Phones rose higher. No one tried to hide anymore. The manager staggered back a step, as if the floor had shifted under him. "That's impossible," he said, voice cracking. "I would have known." She met his eyes. "You didn't know because you never bothered to look." The associate felt his chest tighten. He stared at the name on the screen, then at her. The same woman he had almost helped escort out minutes ago. The guards straightened fully now, not out of fear, but clarity. One of them spoke into his radio quietly. "Stand down." The manager shook his head, scrambling. "This is a setup. You did this on purpose." She shook her head once. "No. I walked in as myself. You decided who I was." She turned slightly, addressing the room more than him. "This is why representation matters. Not because we want special treatment, but because systems fail when assumptions replace verification." The associate swallowed. "Mom, I'm sorry." She looked at him, her expression softening just a fraction. "You did your job when it counted." The manager's voice dropped to a whisper. "Please, we can talk about this privately." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile. "There is no private version of public behavior," she said. "You denied service publicly. You'll face the outcome the same way." She glanced at the tablet again. "What time is it?" The associate checked automatically. 3:14. She nodded. "Good. Make a note." That's when accountability started. The manager sank into the chair behind the desk, hands shaking now, the showroom he once commanded suddenly foreign territory. Around him, the people who had watched quietly minutes ago now stood openly on the other side of the line. The reveal was complete, and there was no walking it back. The collapse didn't come with shouting. It came quietly, efficiently, like a system correcting an error it had tolerated for too long. The associate's tablet chimed again. Then again. He didn't need to read it aloud this time. The manager saw it in his face. The realization hit him before the words ever could. "No," the manager said, standing abruptly. "You can't do this. Not like this." The woman didn't respond right away. She watched as the man who had commanded the room minutes earlier began to unravel, hands shaking, breath shallow, eyes darting toward exits that no longer mattered. She turned to the associate. "Please document everything from the moment I entered." "Yes, ma'am," he replied without hesitation, fingers already moving. One of the guards stepped forward, not toward her, but beside her. "We've received instruction," he said calmly. "Management authority has been reassigned pending review. Whether—" The manager stared at him. "You're siding with her?" The guard didn't flinch. "I'm siding with policy." That word policy landed harder than any insult. The manager laughed weakly, desperation leaking through the sound. "This is a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I can apologize." She met his gaze. "You're apologizing because you were exposed, not because you were wrong." The associate looked up again. "Sir," he stopped, corrected himself. "Your access badge just deactivated." "Thanks for watching." The manager looked down at his badge instinctively, as if it might contradict reality. It didn't. Phones captured everything now. No one looked away. The customers who had once waited quietly were standing, some with arms crossed, others with expressions of grim satisfaction. The red car reflected the scene back at them, glossy and indifferent. "You made a choice," the woman said, her voice steady, almost instructional. "You chose humiliation over verification, control over service. Wadri's end." She stepped closer, not threatening, just undeniable. "And choices have consequences." The manager's shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him all at once. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. She paused, then answered honestly. "Now you're removed from this floor. An internal investigation begins. HR, compliance, legal." She glanced at the associate. Make sure witnesses are logged. Yes, ma'am. The guard gestured gently toward the exit. Sir, I'll need you to step away from the desk. The manager hesitated just a moment, then complied. As he walked past the woman, he stopped. I didn't know, he muttered. She didn't look at him. That was the problem. As he was escorted away, a murmur rippled through the showroom, not applause, not celebration, but release. The tension that had gripped the room finally loosened its hold. The woman turned back to the people watching. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about standards. She glanced once more at the red car, then back at the associate. Now, she added calmly, let's continue the business I came here to do. The collapse was complete. And for everyone who witnessed it, the message was unmistakable. Power doesn't shout. It documents, and then it acts. The showroom felt different now. Not quiet or clearer. People stood where they were, no longer unsure of what they had witnessed. The glass walls still reflected luxury. The red car still shone under the lights, but something more valuable had shifted. The assumption of who deserved to be here. The woman took a slow breath and turned fully toward the room. This is the part people usually misunderstand, she said, her voice calm but firm enough to carry without effort. They think moments like this are about exposure or embarrassment. She paused, letting the silence work. It's not. Take. 2-3. She looked at the associate first, the one who had chosen protocol over fear. You did exactly what you were trained to do, she said, and more importantly, what was right. He nodded, throat tight, pride and relief mixing in his chest. Then she turned to the guards. Thank you for de-escalating instead of escalating. That matters. They acknowledged her with quiet professionalism. Finally, she addressed the customers, the witnesses. You saw what happens when bias is allowed to masquerade as authority, she said. And you saw what happens when it's challenged. No one spoke. No one needed to. She stepped closer to the red car, resting her hand lightly on the hood, not claiming it, not showing off, just grounding the moment. I didn't raise my voice today, she continued. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't demand respect. She turned back toward the room. I raised the standard. Everyone. That's no other place. A ripple moved through the crowd, not applause, but understanding. The kind that settles in the chest and stays there. She glanced at the associate again. Please notify corporate that I'll be reviewing this location's service records personally. Yes, Mom, he replied instantly. She nodded once, satisfied. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, and schedule a full staff retraining, starting with how we treat people before we decide who they are. We have number 10. The showroom doors slid open as new customers entered, unaware of what had just unfolded. Life continued. But nothing here would ever be quite the same. The woman took one last look around, then turned to the associate. Now, she said calmly, let's talk about the car. As they walked toward the desk together equal footing, clear purpose the cameras lowered, the phones went dark, and the moment settled into memory. Not as a confrontation, but as a correction. And for everyone who watched it happen, one truth remained unmistakable. Dignity doesn't ask. Justice doesn't shout. And real power never has to.